It was a Thursday afternoon in late September, and the sun was starting to dip behind the tall buildings of Beverly Hills. The streets were quieter than usual, with only a few people walking past the expensive shops that line the famous shopping district. Denise had just wrapped up a very long day. She had been in back-to-back meetings since 7 in the morning, and her mind was tired. All she wanted was to take a slow walk, clear her head, and maybe look at some nice things in the store windows. She wasn't planning to buy anything. She just needed a moment to breathe. She was wearing her usual outfit: a pair of faded blue jeans, a simple white t-shirt, and some old sneakers that she had owned for years. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried a plain black handbag that had seen better days. She didn't wear any jewelry except for a small gold chain her mother had given her when she turned 18. Denise never cared much about how she looked when she wasn't working. Growing up, she learned that clothes don't make the person. Character does. Hard work does. So she dressed for comfort, not for show. As she walked down the street, a particular store caught her eye. It was one of those high-end boutiques with a fancy French name that she couldn't even pronounce. The window display showed a beautiful black dress on a mannequin, and something about it made her stop. It was elegant but simple. Classy without being too flashy. She thought about an upcoming charity event she was supposed to attend, and wondered if something like that dress might work. She pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside. The store smelled like expensive perfume and fresh flowers. Soft music played from hidden speakers. Everything was white and gold, from the walls to the furniture to the light fixtures hanging from the ceiling. The clothes were displayed like pieces of art, each item given its own space on the racks. Denise took a few steps in and looked around. There were only 2 other people in the store besides herself. 2 saleswomen standing near the back counter. One was tall with blonde hair and sharp features. The other was shorter with red hair and a lot of makeup on her face. The moment Denise walked in, both women looked up. Their eyes moved from her face down to her shoes, then back up again. The blonde one raised an eyebrow and leaned toward her coworker. She whispered something, and the redhead covered her mouth to hide a small laugh. Denise noticed. She always noticed. But she had learned a long time ago not to react to things like that. People had been looking at her that way her whole life. In job interviews, in fancy restaurants, in business meetings where she was the only black woman in the room. She had stopped letting it bother her years ago. She walked over to a rack of dresses and started looking through them. The fabrics were beautiful. Silk, cashmere, Italian cotton. She ran her fingers across a light blue blouse and checked the price tag. $2,000. She moved to the next item. A simple skirt. $1,500. She kept browsing, keeping her face neutral. After a minute or two, the blonde saleswoman walked over. She had a tight smile on her face, the kind that looked friendly but wasn't. "Can I help you with something?" she asked. Her voice was polite, but there was something underneath it. Something cold. "Yes," Denise said calmly. "I saw a black dress in the window. I'd like to take a look at it." The woman's smile flickered for just a second. "That dress? Oh, that's one of our premium pieces. It's from our exclusive collection." "Okay," Denise said. "Can I see it?" The woman didn't move. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, like she was studying Denise. "I'm not sure it would be the right fit for you. It's a very specific style. Very high-end." Denise kept her voice steady. "I understand. I'd still like to see it." There was a pause. The woman glanced back at her coworker, who was watching from the counter with an amused look on her face. "That particular dress is $12,000, the blonde woman said slowly, as if Denise might not understand the number. "We don't offer payment plans or layaway here." Denise felt something twist in her stomach. Not anger exactly, more like disappointment. She had hoped, just once, that things would be different, that she could walk into a store like this and be treated like any other customer. But here it was again. The same old story. "I didn't ask about payment plans," Denise said quietly. "I asked to see the dress." The woman's fake smile dropped completely now. She crossed her arms over her chest. Look, I'm just trying to save you some embarrassment. This store caters to a certain type of clientele. I don't think you'd be comfortable here. Before Denise could respond, the redhead walked over to join her coworker. She had the same smug expression on her face. Maybe you'd have better luck at the outlet mall, she said. They have some really cute stuff there. Very affordable. Or Target, the blonde added. Target has nice things too. Nothing wrong with shopping on a budget. The two women looked at each other and shared a small laugh, like they had just told an inside joke. Denise stood very still. Her heart was beating faster now, but she kept her face calm. She had been in situations like this before. Many times. And she knew that losing her temper would only make things worse. It would only give them what they wanted. So she took a breath. A long, slow breath. You know, she said softly, I grew up in a neighborhood where people judged each other all the time. By what they wore. By where they lived. By what they could afford. I thought things would be different out here. I thought people would be more open-minded. The two women stared at her, their smiles frozen in place. But I guess some things never change, Denise continued. You looked at me and decided in 2 seconds who I am and what I can afford. You didn't ask my name. You didn't ask what I do for a living. You just looked at my clothes and made up your mind? The blonde woman opened her mouth to say something, but Denise held up her hand. No, let me finish. I came in here today because I liked that dress in the window. That's all. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. I just wanted to look at a dress. But you two made it into something else. You made it about power. About making someone feel small. She paused and looked both women directly in the eyes. I hope that made you feel good. I really do. Because one day you're going to realize that the way you treat people says everything about who you are, and nothing about who they are. With that, Denise turned and walked toward the door. Her steps were slow and steady. She didn't rush. She didn't slam the door. She just walked out with her head held high, the same way she had walked into every room where people had doubted her. Outside, the evening air was cool against her face. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking up at the sky. The sun had almost set now, painting everything in shades of orange and pink. She thought about her mother. About all the times her mother had come home exhausted from working 3 jobs, still finding the energy to help Denise with her homework. About all the sacrifices that had been made so Denise could have a better life. Those two women in the store had no idea. They looked at her and saw a woman in old jeans and worn-out sneakers. They saw someone who didn't belong, but they were wrong. They were so very wrong, and soon they would find out exactly how wrong they were. Denise smiled to herself as she started walking toward the parking garage, where she had left her car. It was a yellow Lamborghini. To understand who Denise really was, you have to go back to the beginning. Back to a small apartment on the south side of Chicago, where the winters were brutal and the summers were even harder. Denise grew up in a neighborhood that most people only saw on the news. The kind of place where gunshots were so common that kids learned to tell the difference between fireworks and bullets by the time they were 5. The kind of place where dreams went to die, or so everyone said. Her mother, Gloria, was a small woman with big hands and an even bigger heart. She worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on and food in the fridge. In the mornings, she cleaned offices downtown before the sun came up. In the afternoons, she worked as a cashier at a grocery store. And at night, she took care of elderly patients at a nursing home, wiping their faces and holding their hands until they fell asleep. Gloria never complained. Not once, even when her feet were so swollen she could barely walk. Even when she had to choose between buying medicine for herself or new shoes for Denise. She always chose Denise, always. Denise was the only child. Her father had left when she was 2 years old, and Gloria never talked about him. There were no pictures of him in the apartment, no stories about where he went or why he left. It was like he had never existed at all. And after a while, Denise stopped asking. Growing up, Denise learned very quickly that the world was not a fair place. At school, the other kids made fun of her clothes. She wore hand-me-downs from the church donation bin, things that were always a little too big or a little too small. Her shoes had holes in them, and she stuffed newspaper inside to keep her feet dry when it rained. One day, when Denise was about 11 years old, a girl in her class pointed at her and laughed. "Look at her shoes," the girl said loudly, so everyone could hear. "They look like they came from the garbage." The whole class laughed. Denise just sat there, staring at her desk, wishing she could disappear. That night, she came home and cried in her mother's arms. Gloria held her tight and said something Denise would never forget. "Baby, people are going to judge you your whole life. By your clothes, by your skin, by where you come from. But none of that matters. What matters is what you do with what you got. You hear me? You take all that pain and you turn it into something beautiful." Denise didn't fully understand those words at the time, but she held on to them like a lifeline. And as she got older, they started to make more and more sense. School was hard for Denise, but not because she wasn't smart. She was actually one of the brightest kids in her class. The problem was that nobody expected her to succeed. Her teachers looked at her and saw a poor black girl from the projects. They assumed she would drop out, get pregnant, maybe end up on welfare like so many others in her neighborhood. But Denise had other plans. When she was 14 years old, she discovered something that would change her life forever. Computers. It started at the public library. Denise used to go there after school to do her homework because the apartment was too noisy and there was never enough light. One day, she noticed a row of old computers in the back corner. They were slow and clunky, but they worked. She sat down at one of them and started clicking around. She didn't really know what she was doing at first, but there was something about it that fascinated her. The way the machine responded to her commands. The way she could make things happen on the screen just by typing a few words. She started spending hours at the library every day, teaching herself how to code. She found free tutorials online and followed them step by step. She made mistakes constantly, but she never gave up. When something didn't work, she tried again. And again, and again. By the time she was 16, Denise had built her first website. It was simple, just a page about her neighborhood with some pictures and stories from local residents. But she had made it herself from scratch. And that feeling of accomplishment was like nothing she had ever experienced. By 17, she had created her first app. It was a simple tool that helped people find free resources in their community, like food banks and job training programs. She uploaded it to the App Store, not expecting much. But within a few weeks, it had been downloaded over 10,000 times. People started noticing her. A local newspaper wrote a small article about the teenage girl from the projects who was teaching herself to code. A community organization gave her a small award. Her teachers, the same ones who had written her off, suddenly started paying attention, but the real breakthrough came when Denise applied to college. She had no money, no connections, and no idea how she was going to pay for it. But she applied anyway, to every school she could think of, writing essay after essay about her life and her dreams. And then the letters started coming, full scholarships. From universities she had only seen in movies. Schools with big campuses and famous professors and students from all over the world. They wanted her. They actually wanted her, Gloria cried when she saw the acceptance letters. Happy tears for the first time in years. Denise chose a school in California, as far away from Chicago as she could get. She packed everything she owned into 2 suitcases and took a bus across the country, watching the landscape change outside her window. Cornfields, mountains, deserts, and finally palm trees. College was a whole new world. For the first time in her life, Denise was surrounded by people who believed in her. Professors who challenged her to think bigger. Classmates who saw her potential, not her past, but it wasn't easy. She worked 2 jobs while carrying a full course load. She slept 4 hours a night, sometimes less. She ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches for months at a time. There were moments when she wanted to quit, when the exhaustion was so heavy she could barely get out of bed, but every time she felt like giving up, she thought about her mother, about those swollen feet, about those 3 jobs, about all the sacrifices that had been made so Denise could have this chance, and she kept going. After graduation, Denise got a job at a tech company. She was good at her work, really good, and she moved up quickly, but she always felt like something was missing. She didn't want to spend her life making other people rich. She wanted to build something of her own. So at 25, she quit her job and started her own company. Everyone told her she was crazy. The tech world was dominated by men, most of them white, most of them from wealthy families. What chance did a black woman from the projects have? But Denise didn't listen to them. She had stopped listening to people who told her what she couldn't do a long time ago. She worked out of her tiny apartment for 2 years, surviving on savings and credit cards. She pitched her idea to investors over and over again, and over again they said no. Too risky, they said. Not the right fit? Maybe try again later, but she kept going. She refined her product, a revolutionary new approach to data security that was years ahead of its time. She found a small investor who believed in her. Then another, and slowly, her company started to grow. By the time she was 32, Denise's company had become one of the most successful tech startups in the country. Major corporations were lining up to use her software. Her face was on the cover of business magazines. People called her a genius, a visionary, a trailblazer, and then came the offer. A massive tech conglomerate wanted to buy her company. The price? $400 million. Denise said yes. She paid off her mother's house first. Then she bought Gloria a new car, a nice one with heated seats and a sunroof. She set up a trust fund so her mother would never have to work another day in her life. Gloria cried again. More happy tears. Now, at 38, Denise was one of the wealthiest self-made women in California. She owned homes, investments, and yes, a yellow Lamborghini that she almost never drove, but she still wore old jeans and simple t-shirts. She still carried that same plain black handbag, because clothes had never mattered to her. What mattered was the journey, the struggle, the proof that where you start doesn't have to be where you finish. And those 2 saleswomen at the boutique? They had looked at her and seen nothing. They had no idea what they were looking at. But they were about to find out. For the next few days after leaving that boutique, Denise couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. She tried to push it out of her mind. She had meetings to attend, calls to make, decisions that affected hundreds of employees. She didn't have time to dwell on 2 rude saleswomen in a fancy store, but late at night, when everything was quiet and she was alone with her thoughts, the memory kept coming back. The way they had looked at her, the way they had laughed, the way they had assumed, without knowing anything about her, that she didn't belong. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened to Denise. And honestly, it probably wouldn't be the last. She had learned to live with it, to let it roll off her back like water. But this time felt different somehow. Maybe it was the way they had been so open about it, so casual in their cruelty. Like they didn't even see her as a real person. On Sunday morning, Denise called her mother. She did this every week without fail, no matter how busy she was. Gloria was getting older now, her hair turning gray and her movements a little slower than they used to be. But her mind was still sharp, and her advice was still the best Denise had ever received. "Something's bothering you," Gloria said after just a few minutes of conversation. She always knew. Mothers always know. Denise sighed and told her the whole story. The boutique, the saleswomen, the comments about Target and the outlet mall. She kept her voice calm, but Gloria could hear the hurt underneath. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Baby," Gloria finally said, "what are you going to do about it?" Denise frowned. "What do you mean?" "There's nothing to do. I just have to let it go. Do you?" Another pause. Denise didn't answer. "You know," Gloria continued, "when I was young, people treated me like that all the time. At jobs, in stores, everywhere I went. And I did what you're doing now. I kept my head down and moved on. Because I didn't have a choice. I had you to feed, bills to pay. I couldn't afford to make waves. I know, Mama. But you're not me, baby. You're not in the same position I was in. You have something I never had. You have power. The question is, what are you going to do with it?" Denise was quiet for a long time. Her mother's words echoed in her mind long after the phone call ended. What was she going to do with it? That night, Denise made a decision. She wasn't going to let this go. Not because she wanted revenge. That wasn't who she was. But because maybe, just maybe, she could turn this ugly moment into something meaningful. Something that could help other people who had been made to feel small. On Monday morning, she called her assistant, a sharp young woman named Teresa who had been with her for 5 years. "I need you to find out everything about that boutique on Rodeo Drive," Denise said. "The one with the French name. I want to know who owns it, how long it's been in business, and how I can get a meeting with the person in charge." Teresa didn't ask any questions. She had worked with Denise long enough to know that when her boss had that tone in her voice, something important was happening. By Wednesday, Teresa had all the information. The boutique was owned by a man named Richard Chun, a businessman in his 50s who had started the store about 15 years ago. It had a reputation for being exclusive and high-end, catering to celebrities and wealthy tourists. The staff was trained to be selective about who they helped, which explained a lot. Denise also asked Teresa to do one more thing. She wanted the names of the 2 saleswomen who had been working on Thursday afternoon. Teresa hesitated at this request. "Are you sure?" she asked carefully. "I don't want you to get into any trouble." Denise smiled. "I'm not going to do anything bad. I promise. I just want to know who I'm dealing with." The blonde woman's name was Christine. She had worked at the boutique for 3 years and had a reputation among her coworkers for being cold and judgmental. The redhead was named Patty. She was newer, only about 8 months on the job, and mostly just followed Christine's lead, armed with this information. Denise started planning her return visit. She could have done many things. She could have made a scene on social media, posted about her experience, and watched the internet tear the boutique apart. She had millions of followers, and one tweet from her could have destroyed that store's reputation overnight, but that wasn't what she wanted. Public shaming might feel good in the moment, but it rarely changed anything. People would be outraged for a day or two, then move on to the next thing. Christine and Patty would probably lose their jobs, but they wouldn't learn anything. They would just be angry and resentful, blaming Denise for ruining their lives instead of looking at their own behavior. No, Denise wanted something different. She wanted to create a moment that these women would remember for the rest of their lives. A moment that might actually change the way they saw the world. It took her about a week to put everything together. She made some calls, arranged some meetings, and gathered a small team of people she trusted. Then, on the following Thursday, exactly 1 week after her first visit, she went back to the boutique. This time she wasn't alone. Walking beside her was Teresa, carrying a leather folder full of documents. Behind them was Denise's Leah, a calm and serious woman named Vivian who had been representing Denise for over a decade. And bringing up the rear was a 2-person camera crew from Denise's charitable foundation, the one she had started to help young people from underserved communities get into tech careers. Denise was dressed exactly the same as before. Same jeans, same white t-shirt, same old sneakers. She had thought about wearing something fancy just to see the looks on their faces, but that would have defeated the whole purpose. She wanted them to see her exactly as she was, because that was the point. The glass door swung open and Denise stepped inside. The store looked the same. White walls, gold fixtures, soft music playing in the background. The same expensive perfume smell hanging in the air. And standing near the back counter, just like before, were Christine and Patty. Christine looked up first. Her eyes went wide when she saw the group of people following Denise. She nudged Patty, who turned around and immediately went pale. "Good afternoon," Denise said pleasantly. "Is the owner available? I'd like to speak with him." Christine's mouth opened and closed a few times like a fish out of water. She seemed frozen in place, unable to process what was happening. I can check," she finally stammered. "May I ask who's calling?" "My name is Denise Williams." Christine's face changed. It was subtle, but Denise caught it. A flicker of recognition. A moment of doubt. Like maybe she had heard that name somewhere before, but couldn't quite place it. Patty, on the other hand, showed no recognition at all. She just stood there looking terrified, probably assuming that Denise was there to sue them or get them fired. A few minutes later, a man emerged from a door in the back of the store. He was Asian, well-dressed, with gray at his temples and expensive glasses perched on his nose. He walked quickly, almost nervously, like someone had told him something urgent. Then he saw Denise and his face changed completely. "Miss Williams," he said, his voice slightly breathless. This is such an honor. I recognize you from everywhere. Forbes, Business Insider, the TED Talk you gave last year. I'm Richard Chun. I own this store." He extended his hand eagerly, and Denise shook it with a polite smile. "Thank you. Mr. Chun, it's nice to meet you." From the corner of her eye, Denise could see Christine and Patty exchanging horrified glances. The realization was starting to dawn on them. The woman they had mocked, the woman they had told to shop at Target, was standing in their store being greeted like royalty by their boss. Richard was still talking. Something about how much he admired her work and how he had read about her in some magazine. But Denise wasn't really listening. She was watching the two saleswomen, watching the color drain from their faces, watching the fear creep into their eyes. Good, she thought. Now they understand, but she wasn't done. Not even close. "Mr. Chun," Denise said, her voice calm and steady, "I appreciate the warm welcome, but I'm actually here to discuss something that happened in your store last week. Something involving two of your employees." She turned to look directly at Christine and Patty. "Something I think we all need to talk about." The silence in the boutique was heavy. You could hear the soft music playing from the speakers. A gentle piano melody that felt completely out of place given what was about to happen. Richard Chun's face had gone from excited to confused to worried in the span of about 3 seconds. He looked at Denise, then at Christine and Patty, then back at Denise again. "I'm sorry," he said carefully. "Did something happen? Was there a problem with your shopping experience?" Denise nodded slowly. "Yes, Mr. Chun, there was a problem. A significant one." She turned to face Christine and Patty directly. Both women looked like they wanted the floor to open up and swallow them whole. Christine was gripping the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles had turned white. Patty's lower lip was trembling slightly, like she was about to cry. "Last Thursday," Denise began, her voice calm and measured, "I came into this store. I was dressed exactly as I am now. Jeans, t-shirts, sneakers. I wasn't here to make a statement or prove anything to anyone. I just wanted to look at a dress I had seen in your window." Richard listened intently, his brow furrowed. "But I never got to see that dress," Denise continued. "Because your employees here decided, based on nothing but my appearance, that I didn't belong in this store. They suggested I go to Target instead. Or the outlet mall. They told me the dress was $12,000 and that you don't offer layaway, as if I couldn't possibly afford it." Richard's face flushed red. He turned sharply toward Christine and Patty. "Is this true?" Christine opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Patty just stared at the floor, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. I didn't know who she was," Christine finally managed to say. Her voice was shaky and small, nothing like the confident, condescending tone she had used a week ago. "I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Denise studied her for a moment. She had expected anger, maybe defensiveness, but Christine just looked broken, scared, like a child who had been caught doing something terrible and knew. There was no way out. Part of Denise felt satisfied by this. After all the humiliation she had experienced, there was something gratifying about watching these women squirm. But another part of her, the part that remembered her mother's words about turning pain into something beautiful, felt something else entirely. Compassion. Not for what they had done. What they had done was wrong, and they needed to understand that. But compassion for who they were. For whatever experiences in their own lives had made them think it was okay to treat another person that way. "Mr. Chun," Denise said, turning back to the owner, "I want to be clear about something. I'm not here to get anyone fired. That's not why I came." Richard looked surprised. "It's not?" No, firing them might feel like justice, but it wouldn't change anything. They would just go work somewhere else and do the same thing to someone else? That's not a solution. That's just moving the problem. Christine looked up, a tiny spark of hope in her eyes. Patty was openly crying now, wiping her face with the back of her hand. So what do you want? Richard asked quietly. Denise took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been planning for all week. First, she said, I want to buy something. Richard blinked. Buy something? Yes, I want to buy everything in this store. The room went completely silent. Even the piano music seemed to pause, though of course it hadn't. Everything? Richard repeated like he hadn't heard correctly. Every dress, every blouse, every pair of shoes, every handbag, every accessory. Everything you have in stock. I want all of it. Richard's mouth fell open. He did some quick mental math, and his eyes went wide. Miss Williams, that would be. That would be over $2 million. Denise nodded calmly. I know, my lawyer has already prepared the paperwork. We can finalize the transaction today if you're willing. Christine and Patty exchanged stunned glances. They had no idea what was happening. Was this woman buying out the entire store just to prove a point? It seemed insane. But then again, everything about this situation seemed insane. I don't understand, Richard said slowly. Why would you want to buy everything? Because I'm going to donate it, Denise replied. All of it. Every single item. I run a foundation that helps women who are transitioning out of homelessness. Women who are trying to rebuild their lives, get jobs, find their footing again. One of the biggest challenges they face is not having appropriate clothing for job interviews. You'd be amazed how much a nice outfit can change someone's confidence. Their chances of getting hired. She paused to let that sink in. So, I'm going to take all of these beautiful, expensive clothes and I'm going to give them to women who really need them. Women who have been judged and dismissed and overlooked their whole lives, just like I was judged last week. Women who deserve to feel beautiful and confident, regardless of where they came from. Richard was speechless. He just stood there, nodding slowly, trying to process what he was hearing. But that's not all, Denise continued. The second thing I want is for you to implement a mandatory training program for your entire staff. Training on unconscious bias on customer service, on treating every person who walks through that door with dignity and respect, regardless of how they're dressed or what they look like. She looked at Christine and Patty, and I want these two women to lead the first session of that training. After they complete it themselves, of course. Christine's face crumpled. Not with anger or resentment, but with something that looked almost like gratitude. Like she had expected to lose her job and instead was being given a chance to make things right. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Thank you. I don't deserve this, but thank you. You're right, Denise said quietly. You don't deserve it. But that's not the point. The point is that people can change. I have to believe that. If I didn't believe people could change, I would have given up on the world a long time ago. She stepped closer to Christine, looking her directly in the eyes. I grew up with nothing. Absolutely nothing. I wore clothes from donation bins. I had holes in my shoes. People laughed at me, made fun of me, told me I would never amount to anything. And you know what? Every single one of those experiences made me stronger. Every insult, every rejection, every door that was slammed in my face. I used all of it as fuel. Christine was crying openly now, mascara running down her cheeks. But not everyone has that strength, Denise continued. Some people hear those cruel words and they believe them. They give up. They stop trying. And that's the real tragedy. Not what happened to me. I'm fine. But what about the woman who walks in here tomorrow? Someone who doesn't have my resources. Someone who's already struggling just to keep her head above water. What happens when you make her feel worthless? She let the question hang in the air. I'm giving you both a second chance. I'm asking you to really think about the impact your words have on people. And I'm hoping that someday you'll be the ones helping someone else instead of tearing them down. Patty stepped forward suddenly, her face red and puffy from crying. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I followed Christine's lead. I didn't even think about what I was doing. That's not an excuse, I know it's not. But I want you to know that I'm going to do better. I promise I'm going to do better." Denise looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you. Don't make me regret it." She turned back to Richard. "So, Mr. Chun, do we have a deal?" Richard nodded vigorously. "Yes, absolutely yes. I'll have my team start packing everything up right away. And the training program, I'll implement it immediately. Whatever you need, Miss Williams, whatever you need." Denise smiled. It was a real smile this time, warm and genuine. "Good, I'm glad we could work this out." She began walking toward the door, her team following behind her. But just before she reached the exit, she stopped and turned back one more time. "Oh, and one more thing," she said casually. "I drove here in my car. It's parked right out front. The yellow Lamborghini. Feel free to take a look if you want." And with that, she pushed open the glass door and stepped out into the California sunshine, leaving Christine and Patty standing there in stunned silence. Their entire understanding of the world forever changed. Denise never intended for the story to go public. That was never part of the plan. She had done what she did for herself, for those two saleswomen, and for the women who would receive all those donated clothes. She didn't need the world to know about it, but the world found out anyway. One of the camera crew members, a young man who worked for her foundation, posted a short clip on his personal social media account. It was just a 30-second video showing Denise walking out of the boutique, the yellow Lamborghini gleaming in the background. He added a brief caption explaining what had happened inside, within 24 hours. The video had been viewed over 5 million times, within a week. It had crossed 50 million. Denise woke up one morning to find her phone flooded with messages. Reporters wanted interviews. News channels wanted statements. Her publicist was going crazy trying to manage all the requests. The story had spread like wildfire, picked up by major outlets across the country and eventually around the world. At first, Denise was uncomfortable with all the attention. She had spent her whole career trying to let her work speak for itself. She didn't like being in the spotlight, didn't enjoy seeing her face plastered all over the internet. It felt strange and invasive, like the whole world was suddenly staring at her. But then something unexpected started happening. The messages began pouring in. Not from reporters or journalists, but from regular people. Women from all over the world who had experienced the same thing Denise had. Black women, Asian women, Latina women, women of every background imaginable. They wrote to her about being followed in stores, being ignored by salespeople, being told they didn't belong in certain spaces. One woman from Atlanta wrote about being asked to leave a jewelry store because the owner thought she looked suspicious. She had been shopping for her own wedding ring. Another woman from London shared how a car dealership had refused to show her their luxury vehicles, assuming she could only afford the cheapest models. She was a surgeon who could have bought 3 of those cars with cash. A mother from Houston described taking her daughter to a fancy restaurant for her birthday, only to be seated in the back corner near the kitchen, out of sight from the other guests. Story after story after story. Hundreds of them, then thousands, all from women who had been judged, dismissed, and humiliated simply because of how they looked. Denise read every single one. She stayed up late into the night, scrolling through the messages, feeling the weight of all that shared pain. It was overwhelming. It was heartbreaking. But it was also clarifying. She realized that what had happened to her wasn't just about her. It was about something much bigger. A pattern of behavior that had been happening for generations. A system that made certain people feel like they didn't belong, no matter how successful they became, and she realized that she had a platform now, whether she wanted it or not. The question was what she was going to do with it. The answer came to her one night while she was on the phone with her mother. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Denise said. "All those women who wrote to me. So many of them have amazing ideas, incredible talents, but they can't get anyone to take them seriously. They go to investors and get turned away. They apply for loans and get rejected. Not because their ideas are bad, but because people look at them and don't see potential. They just see stereotypes. Gloria was quiet for a moment. Sounds like someone else I know. Denise smiled sadly. Yeah, it does. So what are you going to do about it, baby? There it was again. That question. The same question her mother had asked her after the boutique incident. What are you going to do about it? This time, Denise had an answer. She called it the Unseen Foundation. It was a new initiative separate from her existing charity work, focused specifically on funding Black women entrepreneurs who had been overlooked by traditional investors. Women with brilliant ideas and solid business plans, who just needed someone to believe in them. Denise put $30 million of her own money into the foundation. She assembled a team of advisors, mentors, and experts who could help these women not just get funding, but actually build successful businesses. She created networking events, training programs, and support systems designed to address the specific challenges that Black women faced in the business world within the first year. The Unseen Foundation had invested in 52 startups, companies in tech, healthcare, fashion, food service, education, and dozens of other industries. Some were small operations just getting off the ground. Others were more established businesses, looking to scale up, and they were thriving. One woman created an app that connected elderly patients with in-home caregivers, inspired by her experience taking care of her own grandmother. Another launched a line of natural hair products that became one of the fastest-growing beauty brands in the country. A third built a tutoring platform that was now being used in schools. Across 15 states, these were the women who had been told no, who had been ignored and dismissed and written off. And now they were changing the world. Denise made a point of staying connected with every single founder her organization supported. She attended their launches, celebrated their successes, and helped them through their struggles. She knew what it was like to build something from nothing. And she wanted them to know they weren't alone. As for Christine and Patty, their stories took unexpected turns as well. Patty completed the bias training program and stayed at the boutique for another year. But something had shifted inside her. She started volunteering at a local community center on weekends, helping young people with job interview skills. She told Denise in a letter that the experience at the store had forced her to look at herself in ways she never had before. She didn't like what she saw, but she was working on becoming better. Christine's transformation was even more dramatic. After finishing the training, she couldn't stop thinking about what Denise had said, about how words could destroy someone who was already struggling, about how people in positions of power, even small power like a saleswoman in a store, had the ability to lift others up or tear them down. She quit her job at the boutique 6 months later. She went back to school, got certified as a diversity and inclusion consultant, and started working with companies to help them treat all their customers with respect. She traveled around the country giving talks about her experience, about the day she had dismissed a woman in old jeans who turned out to be a multimillionaire. She sent Denise a handwritten letter, 8 pages long, explaining everything. She apologized again, not for sympathy or forgiveness, but because she genuinely understood now what she had done wrong. She thanked Denise for not destroying her when she easily could have. And she promised to spend the rest of her career making sure no one else experienced what Denise had experienced that day. Denise kept that letter in her desk drawer. She read it sometimes when she was having a hard day, when the weight of running a foundation and managing her businesses and being a public figure felt like too much. It reminded her why she did what she did. It reminded her that people could change. Years later, a journalist asked Denise what she wanted her legacy to be. She thought about it for a long moment before answering. "I want people to remember that where you start doesn't determine where you finish," she said. "I want them to remember that the way you treat others matters, even when no one is watching. And I want them to remember that success isn't about how much money you have or what kind of car you drive. It's about what you do with whatever you've been given." She paused and smiled. I also want them to remember that you should never, ever judge someone by their clothes, because you never know who you're really looking at. Outside her office window, the California sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and parked in her driveway, gleaming under the fading light, was a yellow Lamborghini that Denise still almost never drove, because some things are worth more than showing off. Some things are worth more than proving people wrong. Some things are about proving yourself right. And Denise Williams had done exactly that.